What do you say? What do you know? It's the full Monte Sports Show. It is Monday, August 1st, 2022. I am your host, Monte Perez, aka the Sports Whisperer. You can follow me on social media on Twitter, MonteJP231, and on TikTok, Monte Perez 231 on TikTok. Some very big news. We just hit 1 million views on TikTok. That's right. We just hit 1 million views on TikTok. I want to thank everyone who watches my TikTok videos. I want to thank everyone who comments. You know, it's pretty funny. As you can see there, 1 million views. About 6 months ago, I said to myself, I'm going to start doing TikTok videos and really starting to post 2, 3 times a day, posting about clips of this show, posting TikTok video, basically my sports takes. And like I said, we just hit 1 million views. I want to thank my friend Felix and Krishan. You want to check their podcasts out, Two Chromosome Podcast, Two Chromo Podcast. They probably told me to do TikTok a year and a half ago, and I didn't listen to them. My friend Andrea told me to do it. Her son Jonathan. They're like, Monty's got to get on TikTok. My sisters. So thank you all for pushing me to do it. I really didn't know what I was doing when I first started, but like I said, about 6 months ago, I made a commitment to start doing it, 2 to 3 times a day, and we just hit 1 million views in about 6 months. So thank you all who support me. Make sure to give this show a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the Nuts and Bolts YouTube channel. We have the best guests all across the country. This week is no exception. Okay, this week is no exception. Chris Rosvoglou is going to join us. He's a little bit under the weather, so we're going to get him on for like 15 minutes. He's going to talk about the Saints, what's going on in preseason. Big question mark with the Saints is obviously over the last 2 years, they've gone through a lot of changes. Sean McVay, their former coach, is now longer coaching them. They have a new coach, the defensive coordinator. Drew Brees left 2 years ago. All right. Anytime you lose a Hall of Fame quarterback and a Hall of Fame coach, you're bound to take a step backwards. So we have plenty of questions for him. And then Charlie Gross is going to join us. He's going to talk about the Buffalo Bills, a team that really came up short last year. I don't even think they came up short. I mean, let's be honest. They lost in overtime because the Chiefs won the coin toss. And we'll talk about what their expectations are for the Buffalo Bills. Is it Super Bowl or bust? Is it Super Bowl or bust? Again, subscribe to the Nuts and Bolts YouTube channel. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, MonteJP231, and on TikTok. Again, 1 million views. I am so happy with that. Let's just keep this thing rolling. Okay, we start each show with the good, the bad, and the funny. You know, it is funny because when I first started writing this out, the good, I was complimenting the Arizona Cardinals. So for those of you who don't know, Kyler Murray signed a deal, a $230 million contract with the Cardinals. And there was an addendum in Murray's contract that first became public last Monday. The clause required him to study game material for 4 hours per week on his own with no TV, internet, or video games. Now, Kyler Murray had a press conference when this came out, and he started bragging about his accomplishments. He said, I was the best player in high school in the state. I was the best player in college. I won the Heisman. I was the only player drafted in the top 20 in baseball and football in the last some odd years, going on just bragging about everything that he's done. So here are the facts, right? Here are the facts. The Arizona Cardinals have never won a Super Bowl. Why would you pay a guy $230 million who doesn't watch film? Who you have to put into his contract, hey man, you got to watch a minimum of 4 hours of film a week without any distractions. Now, let me ask you this question. You think Tom Brady, or as I mentioned before, Drew Brees, had to have in their contract they have to watch film? Do you think that was part of their contract? Tom Brady, you see him in interviews, he loves watching film. Great QBs love watching film, because even if you gain one advantage for one play, it can make all the difference in the world in an NFL playoff game or a regular season game. So the good was good for Arizona Cardinals, holding Kyler Murray accountable, telling him he needs to watch film. You need to do better at your craft. You need to become better. And what did they do once it became public? They took it out of his contract. They took it out. And again, there's a reason losing organizations stay losing. Why would you sign a guy again for $230 million who doesn't really watch a lot of film? Why would you do that? Why invest all that money in a guy who just wants to rely on his athleticism and his in-game decision making? There's a reason that the Arizona Cardinals, the second half of the season, since Kyler Murray has been the starter, have been terrible. And I think part of that reason is he doesn't watch a lot of film, as indicated by what they put in his contract, and other teams make adjustments the second time they see him. So this started out to me as a good story, holding him accountable, making sure that he watches film. But then the Arizona Cardinals, what losing organizations do, they took it out of his contract. And they said it will no longer be an issue. Well, it was an issue because you put it in there originally. So what? Well, what happened in a week? What happened in a week? I'll tell you what happened in a week. The media got wind of the story, and instead of Arizona management and coaching staff saying, yes, he needs to get better at watching film, they caved. They caved. And that's why they're a losing organization. That's why they're a losing organization. Hold these players accountable. End of story. So that's the good. Now let's get to the bad. Can someone tell me what the Seattle Seahawks are doing with the quarterback position and their franchise? Pete Carroll is 15 games below 500 without Russell Wilson, who is now with the Denver Broncos. Let me repeat that. Pete Carroll is 15 games below 500. He was fired by the Jets. He was fired by the Patriots. 7-9 without Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson becomes the starter. And now Pete Carroll, for what he did at USC, which, by the way, was sanctioned after he left. And now because of Russell Wilson, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. And I get that Russell outgrew Seattle with his wife. They wanted to be into a bigger city, bigger media market. Don't kid yourself. Denver's not a small market. Okay? Denver has 4 professional teams and a soccer team. 5 professional teams. So Colorado is not a small market. So he leaves. Now, I don't understand this. I don't get it. The 3 quarterbacks that Seattle has now have 0 success in winning games. If you think a 70-year-old Pete Carroll is all of a sudden going to become super progressive with his offense, with these game managers at quarterback, his offense is straight out of 1986. It was run the ball on first down, run the ball on second down, and then let Russ create something on third down. Well, you think Geno Smith or Drew Lock are going to create like Russell Wilson did? By the way, if you look at play action passes on first down where you fake the handoff, Russell Wilson statistically is in the top 3 all time of completion percentage throwing the ball on first down. Seattle chose a 70-year-old Pete Carroll over Russell Wilson. And if I'm a Seattle fan, I'm miserable because you look at that division. We mentioned, look, whatever you want to say about Cliff Kingsbury, obviously not a good defensive coach, and Kyler Murray, but they know what they're doing on offense. They're going to put up some points. You have Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, who's been to a Super Bowl and an NFC championship. You have Sean McVay, who just won a Super Bowl and has been to 2 Super Bowls. So Pete Carroll, 70 years old, I'm coaching like it's 1986, is going up against these progressive offensive coaches. And this is what Seattle chose. They chose to rebuild with a 70-year-old head coach in a division that arguably has 3 of the top 10 offensive coordinators / head coaches in McVay, Shanahan, and Cliff Kingsbury. What are you doing, Seattle? You chose the wrong guy. You chose the wrong guy. So that's the good, the bad. Now let's get to the funny. Okay, only in Florida. And I'm just going to say this because I didn't realize this before I moved to Florida. Florida is literally Jurassic Park with human beings in it. The amount of wildlife, the amount of lizards, iguanas that I see on a daily basis, this place is just one big zoo. Literally. Literally. So a Florida man robbed a gas station. I think it was like $180. And the cops are chasing him, and he decides to hide out in a swamp area. And what happens? Oh, you guessed it. Within minutes of him hiding, he got eaten by a crocodile. He got eaten by a crocodile. But I'm not going to lie. You don't know where these alligators are coming from. You don't know where. Every time I go running or walking, I don't know if an alligator is going to come at me. We've seen them in the parking lot at Publix. My dad has seen them on the golf course. This is insane, Florida. This man decided to hide in the swamp, and what happened? He got eaten by a crocodile for $180. But this is what Florida is. When I go walking, when I go jogging, I see about 100 mini geckos every 3 or 4 blocks, and I probably see about 15 to 20 iguanas, depending on how hot it is and what time of day. Florida is literally Jurassic Park. It is literally Jurassic Park. Yeah, only in Florida. You can't make it up. You cannot make it up. Yeah. George brings up a good point here with Kyler Murray. What I don't understand is why they would give a guy $230 million who doesn't watch film. I give $230 million to guys like a Tom Brady, like a Drew Brees, guys who live and breathe to be the first one in and the last one out. I say this all the time about Tom Brady. And Michael Jordan had this as well. I don't think LeBron James has this. And that's the only criticism I could say of him. I think LeBron James wants to win. Excuse me. I think LeBron James has a killer instinct. But once you reach a certain level of success, Tom Brady has a supermodel wife at home. He's the first one in and the last one out. Michael Jordan wanted to not only beat you, he wanted to embarrass you and humiliate you. Tom Brady, for all the haters out there, the guy constantly is the first one in and the last one to leave the training facility. He loves watching film because you can gain an advantage by watching film. So give all the credit in the world to Tom Brady, and I just don't get why Kyler Murray is not a film guy. Like, you want to get better, you want to win. These guys are competing at the highest level. Why wouldn't you want to gain every advantage? Why wouldn't you want to gain every advantage? Okay, we're going to bring on Chris Rosvoglou, covers the Saints. No one does it better. Him and I are both under the weather. I just did a test for COVID. Hopefully it'll come back negative. Chris, we're both sick. We're both wearing blue. How are you feeling?
I'm getting better. I should have a bingo card, like every possible symptom, just checking it off the list. Outside of taste, I still have my taste, so I'm happy about that. But getting better each day. I hope the same is for you, Monty.
Okay, that's good news. And thank you so much. We'll get you on for like 10, 15 minutes because then you'll probably have a coughing seizure. So we'll let you go. So, real quick, first, Deshaun Watson, 6 games, could be appealed. I thought he should have got 12 minimum. Give us your thoughts real quick on his suspension.
Yeah, I agree with you, Monty. I think it's frustrating that it's six. I thought that this is a guy that a year suspension would have been fitting because, frankly, if you're not that good at the quarterback position, you're probably not getting a second chance at your job, knowing what we've heard from his off field behavior. It's just really upsetting. And I think the worst part about this is when you see something like this come out, I almost feel like if you're um, an NFL fan who happens to be female, I don't know how you can really look at this product and be like, hey, they respect us. It's one of those really frustrating decisions for me. And the worst part about it is when you read through all of it, right? Like he has to go through team massage therapists now, and they basically said that there was, behavior that they wouldn't promote that he did, but they said it was as non-violent, sexual misconduct. I don't understand how it's non-violent. Like sexual misconduct is sexual misconduct.
Yeah,
So,
I didn't understand that either.
I don't agree with the whole situation at all. I'm not surprised by it though. The momentum started shifting that way the last couple of weeks, but it's frustrating nonetheless.
If nothing else, I said this, when you go to that many massage therapists, it's not because you're looking to be healed, you're looking to prey on someone. Because if you just wanted to get, and I think every NFL player who plays should have a massage therapist, but when you go to that many, you're a predator. End of story.
Yeah, it's very frustrating, and I think for me, when you see the team, his former team, the Texans, settle with 30 women, when you
Oh God.
see
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson settle 20 out of 24 cases, when if we rewinded about 8 months ago, he said he's never going to settle because
Yeah.
he has nothing that he did nothing wrong. Well, what changed? So it's very upsetting. If you read what his lawyers say, they basically said it's not illegal to get a happy ending at a massage parlor, and I was like, okay, now we're moving the goalposts. So
Yes. Yes.
this is a
Yes.
big swing and a miss, and I hope it gets appealed by the NFL and it gets increased, but I don't have any faith there.
All right, Chris. So if you start coughing or sneezing, just wave, and we'll go to some pictures. But real quick, want to talk about your Saints. Listen, this guy has been to a Super Bowl. He's been to NFC Championship games. I don't know why they're so loyal to Winston when this guy's available. Why didn't they go after Jimmy G?
I think there's a couple of factors. I think one of them has to do with the higher price tag. For this one season, Jimmy Garoppolo technically would be more expensive than Jameis Winston would. Another would be familiarity. And tied in with the familiarity is Jimmy Garoppolo's injury that he had to heal over the summer. Now, I know that Jameis Winston's also coming off an injury, but Jimmy Garoppolo, for his situation, he wasn't throwing until about a week or two ago. And for him to join a new system like New Orleans, I think there would be a ramp up period that would really need to be expedited for them to have him ready for week one. So I think that factors into all of it. I'm not saying the idea is a bad idea because I think for the Saints, you are looking at a team that's probably going to be based on playing complementary football. I don't think
Right.
they're just going to be heavy on offense. If anything, they'll be more heavy on defense than they would offense. So I guess in theory, the blueprint makes sense because we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo, good run game, good defense. You can win with him. But I think for the Saints, a lot of it also comes down to potential. I do think that they believe there's more to Jameis Winston than what we saw last year. And even if it doesn't get better than what we saw last year, the Saints were 5-2 when he was a starter. I feel like they have
Yeah. That's a
some
good point.
comfortability there. So I don't think it's a bad idea. And I will go as far to say this: in the awful event that, let's say, Jameis Winston did get hurt in training camp, and obviously I do not want that to be the case, and no one's rooting for that. I think the Saints would be the no-brainer team to call the Niners and be like, hey, we have too talented of a roster. Let's work something out here. But I think for the reasons I mentioned before, that's why they went with Jameis.
Okay, Chris. So I take big swings, and sometimes I don't always hit a home run. I think I hit a lot of doubles. But my big swing here is when you look at this wide receiver core, and if it's healthy with Jarvis Landry, Michael Thomas, and their rookie, this could be one of the best wide receiver cores in the NFL. Am I crazy for thinking this?
No, not at all. And I think it's actually funny because I remember last year it's like a complete 180 because we were talking about how bad the Saints wide receiver room is. But when Michael Thomas actually comes back and shows up, which is great to see, when Jarvis Landry gets added to the team, when Chris Olave gets drafted by the team, you look around, all of a sudden your wide receiver 1, 2, and 3 from last year are now your 4, 5, and 6. So great depth at the position, but more importantly, like what you've said, Monty, you're talking about three potential packed players at that wide receiver spot, and they all do different things. Like Michael Thomas is the ultimate possession receiver. We know that Jarvis has been a great slot receiver for the majority of his career, and Chris Olave, I think he's going to be that kind of home run hitter for the Saints offense, kind of take the top off of a defense. So I do think this could be one of the better wide receiver trios in the NFL. And funny enough, I think if I'm looking at wide receiver trios around the league, their division rival, the Buccaneers, probably have another great one as well. So
Yeah, that's true.
those would be those for sure. If you look at that group of three, it's a pretty loaded group. I have high expectations for the Saints wide receiver core.
I do as well. I think they'll make it easier for Jameis Winston. Now, one of the things I'm doing an article, a little promo here for Nuts and Bolts Sports. It's going to be called PDF. Each week, I'm going to break down on Thursday the preview for the Packers, the Dolphins, and the Atlanta Falcons. And one of the things I was researching is I didn't realize this. I knew they were a great 1-2 punch, but A.J. Dillon actually had more rushing yards last year than Aaron Jones. So that brings me to dominant offenses and running backs like Kamara. Now, to me, 240 rushes, 898 yards. With this guy's talent, why isn't he getting 1,200 yards and why aren't they rushing him 20 to 25 times per game? Are they afraid he just can't take the pounding? Because if I am the Saints coach, this guy's getting at least 30 touches a game.
Yeah, I don't mind the idea of him getting 30 touches a game, but I think for Alvin, you look back at the 2020 season, he ended up playing through a torn MCL for a little bit. And a lot of it was because they were leaning on him heavily, just strictly as a running back, not just kind of like that do-it-all guy that he's great at. And for that, I think for Alvin's, stature, he could get worn down just a tad. And he's never been in 1,000-yard rush in the NFL, and that's
Right.
okay. Like at the end of the day, he's still going to get you a high amount of scrimmage yards, and he's still going to get you a lot of touchdowns, and that's what the Saints are happy about. But I think for New Orleans, if you're talking about inside the numbers and between the tackles, he can do it. He absolutely can. But I don't know if that's when you're going to get the best version of Alvin Kamara, because I think the best version of Alvin Kamara is somewhere around 15 carries a game with about 6 to 7 receptions. And when you do that, you're also prolonging not only his lifespan as a running back in the NFL, but also kind of the, how fresh he is for each and every game after that. So I've seen Alvin do well with a high workload, but then we've also seen after getting a really high volume of touches, all of a sudden there is a 2-3 week stretch where he's either banged up or he doesn't just look like himself. So I think for New Orleans, when you pay like they did for Alvin, and they had to pay him, he's too important to their offense. If you want this contract to get the most out of it, I think you just have to kind of play to what you've been doing. And if it's a pitch count at times, so be it. And if that means Mark Ingram has to get more touches inside, and go for it, as long as Mark Ingram could still handle them at this stage in his career. So I'm not really towards the just run Alvin all the time, because I don't think he can do it like a Derrick Henry or a Jonathan Taylor or a Dalvin Cook, but he's still a really good offensive weapon. And I'll go as far to say that, like, I still think he is their most important player on offense. Like, I truly feel that way.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to disagree with you here just for a second, because now, last year, you had to use him in the screen game. He lined up as a wide receiver at times. But now your wide receiver core is so deep, they don't need him to be the dual threat that he once was. So why can't he get more touches? Why can't he get 1,000 yards?
I mean, he very well can. I just still just, watching him the last 5 years is just not what we've seen. So I would just be surprised if the script changes for a player like him. But even though they do have those great wide receivers, like you mentioned, you're still going to need that underneath guy, especially if Jameis Winston plays more like he did last year. Jameis Winston was pretty hesitant about his initial reads and pushing the ball downfield, and maybe that changes this year. Maybe we see a little bit more aggression from Jameis in that regard in the passing game. But if not, you're going to need that safety valve. And I do think for Alvin, we might see him go back to those high receiving numbers that we're used to, because there's better weapons around him, because someone's going to be open. The defense can cover everyone.
That's a good point.
That would just be my counter argument to that. I don't disagree with you, though. I think if there's ways to get him to 1,000 rushing yards and keep him healthy while doing so, I'm all for it. I just think for Alvin, he's never really been that bruiser. So I don't know if we'll change now, but we'll see. The Saints have the capability because they now have wide receivers, like you mentioned.
Okay, Chris, we're going to have you on for about 5 more minutes. You good with that? You holding up? Okay. All right, great. So real quick, this offensive line, Pro Football Focus has them 21st. When you have a bad offensive line, it's going to be quick three-step drops, screens, misdirections. Is this offensive line as bad as I think they are?
I think I would say they're more unproven than they are just bad. And
Okay.
for two reasons. You know what you're getting out of Ryan Ramczyk, your right tackle. You kind of know what you're getting out of your center and Eric McCoy. The issue is you lose Teron Armstead, who's a Pro Bowl level left tackle to the Miami Dolphins. He is just not only a great player, a great leader. You lose him. Okay, now you have James Hurst at left tackle. James Hurst has been okay, but how good is he going to be? Remember, you're comparing him to a guy who's a perennial Pro Bowler. You did also draft Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa. He's competing for that left tackle job, but he is from a smaller D1 school. And the assumption right now is that he won't be ready for week one. So again, more unproven there. And then your guard play. Andrews Pete's been a Pro Bowler several times, but just because he's a Pro Bowler doesn't mean he actually is a star player. It's just there's not a lot of great left guards. It happens out of necessity. So he's a player who has dealt with a lot of injuries and inconsistencies. So there's some question marks there. But I think the biggest question mark might be at right guard with Cesar Ruiz, a former first-round pick out of Michigan. He hasn't lived up to his potential. And for the Saints, this is kind of his make-or-break year. And I know that he still has another year of team control after this, but they've pretty much put the pressure on. And they have Jari Evans, a former legendary player for the franchise, coming in as an intern coaching assistant. And hopefully that gives him some pointers as to how to get better. So I don't think it's the worst unit in the world, but
Right.
it is definitely
Question marks.
unproven. It's definitely unproven. But I think 21's a very fair spot right now.
Okay, Chris, how about this comment? Chris gets a 9 out of 10 for background. He's just missing a plant.
I am missing a plant. That's a good point. So if I'm going to rearrange some stuff, I got to get a plant in this background.
Okay, last two questions, then we'll get you out of here. Again, Chris is a little under the weather, so we really thank you so much for joining us. One, I look at this defense. Obviously, you have Allen now, the head coach, who was a defensive coordinator. You think that was the right move to make, keep continuity to this team. Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May. I love the back end of this defense. Talk about the strengths of this defense and what's their weakness, if there is one.
Yeah, I'll start with the weakness. I think if there is one, it's defensive tackle. David Onyemata is a fine football player, but last year was a little bit inconsistent for his liking. And the bigger issue is, what do you have behind him? Shai Tuttle, outside of, an amazing pick and then stiff arm on Matt Ryan, there aren't many highlights to kind of boot there. And they did bring in Kentavious Street from the 49ers, and the hope is that he can develop and maybe take that defensive tackle 2 spot. But until that happens, not sure what you're going to get from your interior defensive lineman. So if there's a weakness, that's definitely the weakness right there. As for the strengths of this team, I think it's two of them. I think part of it is your cornerback group. Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, you have Bradley Roby, CJ Gardner-Johnson, and you also drafted Alontae Taylor out of Tennessee. He's going to be a promising player for them as well. So they have talent and depth for days at that DB spot. But I also think you look at the defensive end spot, if healthy, Cam Jordan, Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner, Tano Passanio, there's depth there as well. So if I had to pick one, though, I would say the strength of this team will be that secondary, especially at the cornerback group.
One of the things that has plagued Jameis Winston is last year in college, he was second in the country in interceptions thrown over 20 yards. Do you think because this team is so good defensively, or they can be so good defensively, the coaching staff says, hey, avoid that just throwing it up down the field? Do you think that's one of the reasons why he did that last year? Because he didn't want to risk it because he knew their defense is good enough to play with anybody.
Yeah, last year, I think that was definitely part of the equation, right? The defense was good enough to keep them in the games, and you didn't really want the offense to screw it up, let's just say. And I think another part of it is not having good skill players last season. That was definitely part of the equation. And what's the point of pushing the ball if you don't have the guys to catch it? So I think that was part of it. But I think the question that you pose is something that I've been kind of juggling with the last couple of days. Like, do the Saints stay conservative because they have a defensive coach, or do they be a little bit aggressive and the defensive coach say, don't worry about it, we got this, we can play aggressive? So I think those are kind of the two options they have, but I've been under the belief that this is a team that will play complementary football this season. They'll take their shots when they're presented, but I don't know if they'll be overly aggressive because you do have a talented unit led by a defensive coach who's done a pretty fine job the last couple of years.
Okay, I disagree with George Lopez here 100%. I think the Bucs are the class of this division. I actually have the Falcons going 8-9, and I just think that the Saints. What's the ceiling for this team, Chris? Is it a playoff team, or there's too many question marks right now?
I think ceiling, if we're talking ceiling, I think it could be a playoff team because the talent's all there defensively, offensively. There's too much talent on this roster. And the biggest question for me is just head coach. You lose Sean Payton. That's a big loss. What is Dennis Allen going to be able to do now that he's been promoted to that spot? And, if he does well, I think that the Saints can possibly reach that ceiling. But I think the Buccaneers, for me, I still probably have them as the class of the NFC South. But that Ryan Jensen injury changes an awful
Yeah,
lot
good point.
because he's the guy that outside of Brady, he's probably the next best leader offensively speaking. And to take him out of the picture and know that they have 3 new interior offensive linemen, that kind of scares me because for Brady, I think you could kind of live without having great tackle play, but you need the interior to be great. You don't have that great interior now. So that kind of concerns me, but I'd still say Bucks, but I do think the Saints have the potential to be a playoff team. But again, a lot of unproven and question marks on this team.
Last question, and then we'll get you out of here, Chris. Thanks so much for taking the time. I started doing TikTok, and I'm up to 1 million views on my TikTok page, and I post clips, and I bring this up because anytime I post the clips of you talking Saints, I'm getting 10,000 views, 20,000 views. It's phenomenal. Why is this Saints? We're going to talk to Charlie in a minute about Bills Mafia, but talk about the Saint fans wherever they go. The Saints just travel great. It's such a passionate fan base. They embrace you. I've seen your Twitter page since you've been really going full force with the Saints. What is it about this fan base that makes them so special?
I think part of it's loyalty, right? I mean, they've had some bad playoff losses the
Yeah.
last couple of years, and they continue to show up for the next season and get ready to go. And I think another one is just that special bond for, ever since I'd say '06, the Saints and their fan base have just been so closely knit. And it's almost like the city needs their football team and vice versa. The football team needs their fan base to kind of keep them going. And that's why we've seen the Saints at their best in the Superdome. So overall, I think it's that loyalty and I think it's that bond that they have.
Now, have you been to a game in the Superdome yet?
I actually have not, Monty, but I will be there October 16th, Bengals
That's
Saints.
Awesome. Bengals Saints. That's a damn good game.
Yeah.
That's okay. Final question. We'll let you go. Are you buying that Jalen Brunson makes the Knicks a playoff team? Because I'm not.
Playoff team, no. Do I think he makes them a better team? Definitely. But they still got some work to do.
They do. All right, Chris, feel better. How can we follow you? How can we support you? Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. People can follow me on Twitter at Rosvoglou Report. They can also check out my podcast, Straight Up Saints for Boot Crew Media, and check out my work at The Spun by Sports Illustrated. And Monty, any Monday you need me, I'll be there as long as I'm feeling good. Mondays are a good day.
I will. And listen, just watch comedies, watch stuff that makes you feel good. That's the best way to heal. Rest, sleep, and feel better soon, man.
Thank you so much. Same to you, Monty.
All right, take care. Chris Rosvoglou always does a tremendous job. He's under the weather. He's not feeling well with COVID. So thankfully he came on to the show and really gives us a great insight for, what Saint fans should expect this upcoming season. When we come back, Charlie Gross is going to talk about the Buffalo Bills. We may disagree. A lot of people have the Bills as the Super Bowl favorite. I don't. As you remember, I didn't buy into them last year. And it's the same question I'm going to have for him. I just don't think they have enough of a running game. They rely too heavy on Josh Allen, but we'll get into that. You're watching the Full Monty Sports Show live on YouTube.
Enjoy 40% off site-wide. Vitable takes the guesswork out of feeling good. Get your own personalized daily vitamin pack safely delivered to your doorstep every month. Take their online quiz to find out which vitamins and minerals can support your personal needs based on your own diet and lifestyle. Hashtag only what you need, nothing that you don't. All vitamins are manufactured in Australia at the highest quality standard. Ingredients come in the best form for their absorption by your body. Enjoy 40% off site-wide using code NBS40 at checkout.
East Coast Covers, creator of the Smart Commuter Cover, designs and manufactures custom American handmade quality products. It is the only cover with an adjustable 4-toggle lock-in cord system, which lets you create the fit you want without the need for additional tie-downs. The cover conveniently self-stores when pulled into the attached backpack and also provides a pocket for storing small belongings. Nearly 42 years of riding experience are behind every design with a cover for whatever 2 wheels you ride.
All right. Again, I want to thank Chris Rosvoglou. Keep the comments coming. Always does a good job. Love to see people telling Chris to feel better. Yes, the city. Yes, 1 million views. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's bring on Charlie Gross. Going to cover the Bills for Nuts and Bolts Sports this year. It's the first time on our show, so let's make them feel welcome. Charlie, put the Bills background up for you. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm
Oh.
excited for our upcoming disagreement.
Oh, yes. Listen, people disagree with me all the time on my show. It makes it interesting. All right, let's get right to your Buffalo Bills. 3 straight playoff appearances. Would you say now, because the Patriots for years have dominated that division, beat up on everyone, would you say now that it's the Bills' division to win, and they sort of got that, big brother Patriot off their back, and they go in with a swagger and confidence that they're the best team in the division now?
I think so. I think the fans feel that way. I don't know if the Bills themselves feel that way, and maybe they did last year, which was part of the problem, because I felt like they were a bit believing their own press clippings last year, if you will, and I don't think they played as good as they could. But I don't think there's any fan in Buffalo who really fears the Patriots. We're starting to look at them as kind of a poverty franchise. Like, we get what you did for 20 years. Don't get us wrong. Like, we can't take that away from you by any
Right.
means. But that's over. If that's not clear that that's over, I don't know what else to say. I think it's fairly obvious. So the Patriots don't really concern us. There's still some members of Bills Mafia that still really want to like stick it to Tom Brady. Like, beating him in the Super Bowl this year would be really great for them. Personally, I don't care. I'm over it.
Of course.
It's he's not on the Patriots. One of the greatest quarterbacks, if not the greatest quarterback ever. Give him his credit, and he moved on to other things.
So I thought it was absolute BS the way the game ended last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. Everyone knows if the Bills got that ball, if they won the coin toss, they would have came down and scored. I thought Josh Allen handled it with class. I thought Patrick Mahomes handled it with class. How long did it take you to get over that loss?
Me? Well, I'm not the most emotional Bills fan ever, so for me it was a little quicker. I think it probably took the fan base, oh man, a couple months maybe,
Right,
I think, to really sort of to stop mentioning it. But once the draft happens and you kind of hit that summer lull and people see training camp on the horizon, I think you stop talking about it. Me, I was more just upset about the coaching because I
Right.
felt like there were communication issues, and Sean McDermott hasn't exactly said that, but other players who like left the team have basically said there were communication issues. Tyler Dunn wrote a great article about it, and I think McDermott was just sort of coaching scared in the playoffs the past couple years against the Chiefs. And so for me, it's more of a, why did you coach the way you coached as opposed to the overtime rule in general?
And you know what? Just playing not to lose instead of playing to win. Like I totally agree with what you're saying. When they didn't squib kick it, I said, "What the hell are you doing?" You gave Patrick Mahomes 2 timeouts and 13 seconds. So
Yeah.
that to me, and listen, we're going to get into this. Just because Joe is the owner of Nuts and Bolts Sports, you don't have to agree with him. The Bills are going to the Super Bowl. So we'll get into that in a minute. All right. So I have some questions about the Buffalo Bills this year, and one of them is their receiving core. Okay, Stephon Diggs, number 1 wide receiver, great pickup. But let's be honest here. Gabriel Davis had 35 catches. Now that Cole Beasley is gone, who's the number 2 wide receiver in this group?
Well, I would say that for me, the number 2 pass catcher is Dawson Knox.
Okay.
I think he's going to build on what he did last year. I think, for depth chart purposes, like if you go on to our lads, they do all the depth charts.
Yes.
Gabe Davis is wide receiver 2. I think we expected Jamison Crowder to be the slot. He hasn't even stepped on the practice field yet in training camp. It's, Isaiah McKenzie, by all accounts from the beat reporters, say what you want about training camp, he's been lighting it up out of the slot, paid his dues behind Cole Beasley. So I think what's going to happen is it's going to be it's going to be Stephon Diggs with like 170 targets, and then everybody else. And everyone else is just going to, whoever's open's getting the ball. I think they're going to keep Gabe Davis in a similar role to what he has been, which is, kind of on flies, corners, posts, down the field type stuff. I don't know if he'll do a lot of intermediate stuff. And I think you'll see Knox, and McKenzie and Diggs kind of work more on the underneath stuff. So I think it's going to be sort of death by 1,000 cuts is kind of what they're going for this year in terms of the wide receiver core. And yeah, there's fans who think that Gabe Davis is just going to, 80 catches, like 1,200 yards and like 14 touchdowns. And I mean, I need to see him run more of a route tree and not be the beneficiary of, being wide receiver 5, like
Right.
before I say that he's like this great number 2 wide receiver. They schemed him open. There was Diggs, Beasley, Knox in front of him last year. So let's see how he does with the obvious added attention of a multi touchdown game against the Kansas City Chiefs as the league's lasting memory of him before we crown him anything in particular.
So you see plenty of athletes, and again, if you live in a state where they don't require it, where if you're unvaccinated, they're still playing, they're still contributing. I gotta assume that there was something else with Cole Beasley other than the fact that he was just unvaccinated. Why did he fall out of favor so quickly? Is it because Stephon Diggs is such the clear number 1? But who's going to replace him in the slot? Because there were times where Cole Beasley over the last couple of years, on third down, he was always getting open. He was a huge, valuable asset to this Buffalo Bills team.
Absolutely. And I think in a lot of ways, he was Josh Allen's security blanket when Josh was out of rhythm. I think he looked to Cole Beasley for some easy completions, for some open completions to kind of get him going again. So your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I guess what I say is Isaiah McKenzie right now is the slot guy. I think he's a different player than Cole Beasley because I think Cole Beasley is a top 10 route runner probably in the NFL.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't really know what it was exactly. I think they wanted Cole to take a pay cut and he didn't want to do it. And he was, I think most people are probably familiar with his comments about, I don't care, I'll just retire. So he didn't, I don't know. I don't know what went on behind the scenes. I think they handled it the best they can. And I think it is pertinent to remember that although Buffalo is in New York State and the city of Buffalo is extremely Democratic, all the surrounding suburbs lean heavily more Republican. So there is a 50-50 audience for the Buffalo Bills franchise. So, I think they handled it the best they could. And that's one of Sean McDermott's things is he really believes that he wants to let the players be themselves.
Yeah.
And and that's why guys want to come here. Obviously, Josh Allen is probably the main reason, but he wants the players to be able to be themselves. And Cole Beasley was able to be himself.
Yeah.
And as far as anything that happened in the locker room, I can't speak to that. I don't know if even the beat reporters really know. It just kind of happened.
Okay, real quick before we get back on the Buffalo Bills, I talked this with Chris earlier. Just want to get your take on it. Deshaun Watson, 6 games, a joke. It's an absolute joke. I said 12 minimum to a year. I think this guy has predatory tendencies. And as the quarterback, as the face of the franchise, I just don't know how he ever recovers from this. Although the NFL, let's be honest, you could beat someone up, you could DUI, you could do almost anything except kneel during the national anthem, and you won't get kicked out of the league. So, how do you feel about his suspension? Do you think it was enough, or do you think it was nowhere near what it should have been?
I think it was a joke. I think the NFL on discipline in general has been a joke.
Yeah.
I don't know, for 15 years, 20 years, start going all the way back to the Ray Rice thing. If we're really being honest, and the Houston Texans are accomplices in this. The Cleveland Browns are accomplices in this. If you really get into the thing of it, he's a predator, and he should be. I believe he should be banned for life. And I don't need somebody. I don't need to go into a court of law and prove this and prove that and have him be sentenced to any sort of time. It's obvious he's a predator. Anyone with any sort of common sense will know that he's a predator. I know there's people out there who are just gonna, he wasn't a court of law. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's the dumbest take ever. The whole court of law thing. He obviously is a predator. He should be suspended for life. I think maybe the most basic thing we could hope for, and what I think Roger Goodell wanted was a year.
Yeah,
and I think that's pretty lame, because then obviously the Browns were expecting him to be out for the year by the way they structured the contract. But and honestly, it's almost become a microcosm of our society. Like our society really struggles to care about women when it really matters. And I think that's a joke. Point. And obviously, you and I are sitting here talking about football. We both write, work, however you want to say it, for, or I'm going to start writing for a thing that covers football, and football is the biggest thing in the land, and the only way for us to speak is through our money. And I don't think any of us, unfortunately, are willing to speak through our money. And that's the only way the NFL is going to change.
Yeah.
If you stop buying the products, you stop buying the jerseys, you stop buying the tickets, you stop watching. It's the only way anything's going to change. And we all get very alarmed and very upset. And then we just keep buying jerseys and buying tickets and watching games. So,
You bring
that's
up a
all I
great
can really
point.
say.
I used to be a Floyd Mayweather boxing fan, and then when I found out how many women he would beat up in domestic violence, I didn't watch his fights anymore. I would not pay for it. I would not watch it. I would not comment on it. And then someone said, "Oh, but this guy, was one of the Jets players a few years ago, got a DUI." I go, "What am I supposed to do? There's, 85 guys on a roster. Some are active, some aren't. I don't root for individual players. I root for the team. It's
Right.
easier to overlook when there's a big set of players." Now, I'll be honest, I'm a huge Met fan. Aaron Rodgers, not because of the vaccine, but the way Aaron Rodgers attacked the media and blamed everyone else instead of looking at him and saying, "I could have done things differently," he turned me off to the Packers. He's the face of the franchise. If I am a woman in Cleveland and I see, and again, I don't want to speak for women, but how can you root for Deshaun Watson after everything you know? And if you look at the stuff that he has done, it is grotesque as a human being.
Yeah, it's just pretty obvious. Like, to me, like, I don't understand it. Luckily, I've always sort of rooted just for the Bills more than individual players. I certainly have a few players that I like more than others, but there's no player that, like, I'm like, oh my god, I'm obsessed with them or anything, and I root for them no matter where they go. I'm just more of a fan of the franchise. And I don't know. We could probably do a whole podcast on our
Yes.
society and how our
Yeah.
society is set up, and how it really does allow um for
Predators to
stuff
exist.
like this. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
don't know. I guess, like I said, we could do a whole thing. Well, yeah, and I hello Jersey girl, I appreciate that. Well, and I think, Monty, to your point, I I don't really want to speak for women, but I think women need us as allies. Like the good
Yeah.
guys, they need us as allies. So they certainly need us to if white males are the majority, then they need the good ones to speak up on their behalf, or at least speak up standing next to them. So that's really all I can do, and I just think that the whole behavior is disgusting. And I'm sure there's men and women who try to excuse this behavior, whether it was Ray Lewis, Ray Rice, Kareem Hunt, the list goes on and on and on. Greg Hardy, right? I mean, my God, like, it's ridiculous and it's disgusting. And you know, the reason that this happens is because of money. And I know that we've made the society where we exchange money for goods, but the pursuit of money has allowed us to overlook horrible, disgusting discretions like this. And I don't know how to fix that, because we're pretty far into this economic system that we have here in this
Yeah,
country
that's a
and on
good
the
point.
planet. But
That's a
I mean,
good
that's
point.
really what it is.
That's a
It's
good
it's a,
point.
it's the money that drives it. If we all bartered and traded, and here I'll give you, I'll fix your plumbing and you fix my car, maybe we would be less willing to
It's a great
excuse
point.
this type of behavior. Our society has a celebrity issue. I
Of
mean, how many
course.
people stalk Demi Lovato or Taylor Swift? They stalk Josh Allen. Like, what's
Yeah.
wrong with you people?
Get a life.
There's something there that people want to be. I don't know. They just love these celebrities so much, like they're living through them, and they can't just pull it back and realize that they're just people who happen to be talented in something that we watch on television, more talented than you and I. But I think he should be banned for a life, and anything less than that to me is a joke.
Great conversation. Great point. I appreciate your passion on that because I feel the exact same way. And I'm just going to share a little quick story for you, talking about people who make it to professional sports who you just knew were just absolute jerks from the minute they were born. I actually was working Bogota High School, not Bogota, Bogota summer camp volunteering one day, and Richie Incognito was
Ugh.
12 years old, and he was pushing and beating up everyone. And I literally grabbed him and I said, "You touch one more kid, I'm going to kick the you know what out of you." He was such a bully. So when I saw him rise and I saw what a terrible human being he became, who, let's be honest, he became a very good offensive lineman in his later years. But Richie
Absolutely.
Incognito, someone you know who played a ball, just a terrible human being.
Right, but he's a crappy person.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
mean, like, and then you can get into a discussion how much does that matter, right? Like, you can be like a crappy person and be rude to people at the supermarket and not return your shopping cart and like push little kids out of the way and be a great singer. And it's kind of like, well, which one do we value, right? Like, are we how much are we willing to forgive? And I don't expect every human being to be this perfect person. I'm certainly not, but there has to be some level of, well, you want to call it morality or just common sense. I mean, I don't know what it is. Well, you can label it whatever you want, but our society is willing to excuse bad behavior if you're good at something, like if you're
Right.
really good at
Yeah.
something. And that's all of our faults. It's my fault. It's your fault. No offense. It's my mom's fault. And I guess I just don't know what to do about it at this point. We're so far down the track.
I will
I
say
don't know
this.
how to change it.
One of the things that my mom always used to say to me as a kid, and I still to this day I do it. She said, "Be a good person, not because people are watching or you expect something back. Just treat people nicely, just to treat them nicely. You don't need someone to say thank you. That's their karma on social media if you do something like that." She said, "Just treat people nicely." And that's my motto. I always try to treat people with respect. Now, if someone gets in my face or someone's rude to me, I'm coming at them like a spider monkey. I'm not going to be that person. But
Right.
someone I don't know, I'll give you a prime example. Last year, I'm checking out of the grocery store, and someone says "Happy Holidays" to me, and I said "Happy Holidays" back to them. And this guy goes, "It's Merry Christmas." I said, "For you, it's Merry Christmas." I said, "In my house, I say Merry Christmas." She says "Happy Holidays." I'm saying "Happy Holidays." Why? Because I'm not a jerk. I'm not going to force anything on you. But it just goes to show you that people, going to your point, people nowadays in our society want everything to, they just have no sense of decency. I don't know what has happened over the last 5 or 6 years where it's no longer help your neighbor, but it's also kick your neighbor if you disagree with them.
Yeah, and I don't think anything different's happened. I think the country's always been this way. I think the only thing different is that we have social media, so now you can just share it with everybody. Back when I was like, I'm 44, right? Like back when you're growing up, and my grandparents, you hear the stories about, oh, I can't believe that Susan and Rob are like that, right? Like this you don't need to be neighbors with somebody to find out they're a crappy person
Right.
nowadays. They're
Right.
more than willing to post it on TikTok or
Yeah,
Facebook
you're
or
right.
whatever you want. So all it's really done, it has allowed us to realize that America is full of really crappy people, and we just didn't realize it before. I don't think there was some shift in the population in general. It just became like, I saw somebody the other day that said there's always been just stupid people in general. It's social media gave them a place to congregate and share their ideas.
Now
Whereas
there's a
before they were
platform.
they were separated and they couldn't communicate with each other because they didn't know that they all existed. Now they know they all exist. So now they're all communicating. That's the problem.
All right, let's get back to the Bills here. Great conversation talking with Charlie Gross, who's going to be writing for Nuts and Bolts Sports, covering the Bills. So here's the problem I have. I think Kansas City is the best team in the AFC. Okay, and the problem I have with the Bills is two things. The I think their defense is going to be very good. I think they'll put up numbers, but their offensive line by Pro Football Focus is ranked 20th. And besides Josh Allen, who are you relying on in cold weather games, especially in Buffalo, if they get the home field to run the ball?
I don't think they really care that much about running the football. I think that they're living in the new NFL. And I mean, Sean McDermott does want more balance. I think that that's pretty obvious, but I think it's more about being able to run efficiently when it's time to run. Um, and I mean, the Bills' offensive line is weird to me because I think this is the best offensive line they've had because they've had some really bad ones. Let's be honest. John Feliciano, I think is a backup player at best, and they're starting him for a while. Darrell Williams, very unathletic. I think that showed last year. So I think now that they've got Deion Dawkins, they've got Spencer Brown, presumably, even though he's been injured all offseason, he's finally back practicing. For those of you who are aware of relative athletic score, the 1 through 10 ranking, this guy named Kentley Platt does it. He gathers all the combine agility tests and all that stuff. Spencer Brown got a 10. So he's extremely athletic. He's 6'7", like 320. He's got a nasty attitude. Mitch Morris, I think, is a pretty high-level center. And then the guard play has always been sort of suspect. The Bills struggled a lot during the first 12 games or so of last year. And then they inserted Ryan Bates and the offensive line suddenly became this fantastic thing. And they've got Roger Saffold, who was with the Titans and the Rams. So I think this is probably the best offensive line that the Bills have had since McDermott, Bean, Josh Allen have been here. And yeah, I think they want Zach Moss to take some of the short yardage stuff away from Josh Allen. That's the one thing I will say about the run game that I think kind of fell flat last year. But if you do look at Josh Allen's stats on Pro Football Focus, he has 387 rushing snaps, but only 71 were designed runs. So to me, that says that he's running sometimes for his life because the offensive line stinks. And if you go back to the first game of the year last year against Pittsburgh, I think Cody Ford gave up something it's either 7 or 12 pressures in that game alone.
Yeah, well.
So I think a lot of that has become him just kind of like being able to extend the play and kind of run for his life. And he's so athletic that he gets all these yards. But if you look at like the designed runs, I think the designed runs have dropped every year. And they only really started doing designed runs in the second half of the Tampa game last year when Josh Allen, even though it was still a loss, came out of the locker room, kind of took over the game, put the team on his back. And then they're running QB power against the Patriots, in the next game or two. And I think they just kind of realized, like, this is our guy. He can do everything. Things aren't going well, so we got to put it all on his back. But they're aware, and they do want to take more off of his plate, whether that's with better blocking, just so he's not running for his life, or with better rushing. But I don't think you're going to see them, come close to like a 55-45. It's going to be like 62-38 in terms of running versus passes. They're fully committed to wide receivers and tight ends and 11 and 10 personnel, mostly with some 12. They're not doing the power eye or anything like that. They're throwing it all over the place.
Now, you lose your offensive coordinator, but I don't think this is going to be as good as he was as a coordinator. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal because you have Ken Dorsey, who was the quarterback coach, and, him and Josh Allen really trust each other. They're very close. Talk about, did you like the hire? Did you want them to go outside the organization? Or were you like, this is a no-brainer? And talk about what Dorsey's going to bring to the table that might be different, if anything, from your previous coordinator.
Yeah, I think in 2020, we thought they'd lose Brian Dable. And at that time, I was a little concerned about Ken Dorsey because he's never called plays. And I'm not saying he suddenly called plays in 2021, but I do feel more comfortable with it because that's the guy that Josh Allen wanted. The verbiage is going to stay the same. It's a Earhart Perkins verbiage. So if anyone's familiar with that, you understand what that is. And they added Joe Brady as quarterback's coach. They got his buddy Matt Barkley again back to do the quarterback 3. And I think that as good as the Buffalo Bills offense has been the past 2 years, it's really kind of only scratched the surface of what they really can do. They've basically done all this with just throwing to wide receivers and Dawson Knox. If you take away Josh Allen's rushing yards, I think they're 29th in rushing. They're 30th in quarterback passes, receptions, and I think they're 30th in receptions for tight ends. So I think those are areas that you can expand, which is why they drafted James Cook, why they signed OJ Howard. And I think you're going to see Dorsey run more 12 personnel. Now, it's not going to be like 40% 12 personnel, but it might be like 22% 12 personnel, which is going to free up Dawson Knox to be more of a move tight end, while OJ Howard, I think, is more of the inline guy. So I think the offense is going to look different somewhat with formations. I think they're going to run more in-breaking routes because they're really concerned about being last in the NFL in terms of yak, which is crazy, right?
Which
like
is
to think about
yards
that.
after catch for those who don't know.
Right. So I think they're really trying to run routes that are more conducive to that. And they did run a package the other day, and I know this is training camp, but they had 2 tight ends, Diggs, their fullback, and James Cook. And then obviously, whatever, and all of a sudden it's like 10 personnel because they all went out wide, and I think the fullback got the ball like for the touchdown. So they're trying to really evolve, and because I think now the tape is they've got down tape on 11 and 12, and now it's like, okay, well, how do we change this up so that the defenses don't know what to expect from us?
So let's talk about this defense for a second here, because I look at this defense and I say to myself, talented all over. I talked to Chris earlier about the Saints safeties. I love Jordan Poole, Micah Hyde. Talk about the strengths and weaknesses, if there is one, because let's be honest, they were number 1 in giving up points last year, and just a little bit over 17 per game. So the Bills defense should be just as good this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best safety tandem in the league. I think most people think it's the best, in Buffalo anyway. And I think you get a pretty strong argument from any Bills media member or content creator if you're going to suggest a different pair. Jordan Poyer was an all-pro last year. He's really all over the place. He can cover the tight ends. He's forcing turnovers. He can blitz. And I think the great thing about them is they can really rotate coverage. They can both play deep. And I believe if you go to Pro Football Focus and you look at the yards against in terms of like they divide the field into deep thirds, middle thirds. Ever since Micah Hyde's been on the team, the Buffalo Bills have the lowest passing yardage allowed in the deep middle, and it's either the deep left or the deep right.
Yep.
So he really covers so much ground. And the Bills defense is really predicated on, okay, we've got Micah Hyde in the back end. We've got Trey White on one side. We've got the length of Tremaine Edmonds in the middle, and we want to force you to throw to a certain spot on the field, and we're going to take away the rest of the field. And if you throw it there, it's either going to be incomplete, we're going to get a turnover, and that's how they've always played defense. So I think it's the best safety tandem in the league, and I think Tom Brady kind of confirmed that a few years ago. They don't show you what their actual coverage is until after the ball snapped, and he had a heck of a time, and he basically said it's one of the most difficult safety tandems to read coverage off that he's played in his life.
And talk about getting this guy, obviously an absolute playmaker, when healthy, still has a lot left in the tank. Would you say over under here 10 sacks is way too low for him? Or are you expecting 15 to 18 sacks for this guy?
Yeah, I think 10 is, you got probably a good number in 10.
Okay.
If you're expecting 15 or more, he usually plays. We went back and kind of looked at his snap counts, and he's played usually between like 70 and 80%. I think it's going to be more around 64% to like 72%. The Bills have such
Charlie, sorry to interrupt you, but one of the stats that I thought was insane is how the Bills front seven, no one played more than 40% of the snaps. They're constantly rotating guys, and I think this is such a genius thing, because in the fourth quarter, where offensive linemen wear you down, the Bills don't get worn down because they're constantly rotating their front seven.
Yeah, even if you go back and look at Sean McDermott in Carolina when he had Charles Johnson and Julius Peppers and look at their snap counts, you'll find a similar thing. He really doesn't want anyone playing more than 72% of the snaps. Basically all the defensive linemen are it's designed for them to just run straight at the quarterback, basically.
Right.
And they want as many fresh bodies as possible. So he doesn't get a lot of guys who have double-digit sacks. Obviously, Julius Peppers and Charles Johnson, I think, both did it in the same year. But with the Bills, it hasn't happened yet, and some of that's talent, a lack of talent. But yeah, Von Miller isn't going to have as many sacks, I think, as people are expecting, but I think he's going to have a ton of pressures. And they really would try to keep everybody fresh. And I really think that the addition of Von Miller, but also the addition of Daquan Jones at the one technique, I think is really, really going to set this defense free because they've had a problem finishing. They've got Tremaine Edmonds playing on his 5th-year option without a contract extension. They have to pick up, they have to decide on an extension for Ed Oliver, and having these two new guys, a two-gapping one tech and Von Miller, I think is really going to allow Edmonds and Oliver to show the Bills, their best selves. And I think they want both of those guys back. I'm not saying they don't, but this is the first time that I think they've really surrounded those guys with other players who are going to allow these two guys to play at their best. Like, I think the Colts do a great job of protecting Darius Leonard, and I don't think Tremaine Edmonds has had that same protection until now. So it's exciting for us to see how these guys will affect the linebackers and obviously the defensive backs as well.
So, Charlie, if you're the head coach, how do you sell this to players who want to play every down? We hear stories that players, they don't want to come out. If I'm McDermott, I just say, guys, you're playing and your stats will go up because you're going to be fresher, right? Is that how he sells it? To get and plus, when you're practicing, when I used to coach AAU basketball and college basketball, we played 10 and 12 guys. So during practice, guys practice harder because they know they're going to play the game. This is an easy sell. Most people would think it's difficult, but the Bills have been doing this, and he's been doing it for years.
Right, and I think it's the results, and obviously they had the 1 year in Carolina where they went to the Super Bowl. But I think if you look at his track record, certainly here in Buffalo, I always looked at the Buffalo defense as this sort of living, breathing thing. It's not just one guy. It's really all 11 guys playing in the right direction. And now I think he says, well, look, like we got to the AFC Championship, 2 years ago. We should have won the game last year and then got there again. And we're the number one defense like 2 or 3 years in a row, basically, depending which metric or which stat you want to cite. And so I don't know exactly what the conversations were with Von Miller, but it's like a question that gets asked almost every press conference when they speak about it, and they've talked to him. And I would guess it went something like, hey, you know what? Like, I know you might not get as many sacks and maybe you're chasing the sack record. Like, he's probably the guy that has a shot at it. But look, we want you fresher for the big moments so you can get, sacks in big moments in games. And, we feel like we have a really good shot to win the Super Bowl in the next 3 years. So yeah, you might only get 10 sacks this year, but again, as you did in LA, you might be the guy who ends the game on a sack in the Super Bowl. So,
yeah.
It's kind of like if you're willing to sort of be a little less, I don't want to use selfish is the only thing I think of, but if you're willing to buy into this team we're hoping is going to get you one ring, if not more. So, if you're willing to buy into that, we'll all succeed together.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so I don't think the Bills are going to the Super Bowl, but talk to me and all the Bills fans watching. Why is this year different? Is it Super Bowl or bust? If they do not get to the Super Bowl, is it a failure now? Because everything has been, they took a step back last year. They should have won the game, obviously, overtime, whatever. 2 years ago, they go to the AFC Championship. Is this a team now that's ready to take the next step? And like I said, is it Super Bowl or bust?
I mean, I think most of the Bills fans feel like it's Super Bowl or bust. I think most of them feel like if they don't win a Super Bowl, it will be a failure, or at least if they don't get there. I don't look at it quite in that way because I know it's hard. Obviously, 31 teams lose and don't get to win the Super Bowl, and obviously, 30 teams don't even get there. So to have this thing where you think it's preordained, I think is obviously, like, fan is short for fanatic, right? So fans, of course, are very excited, but I would say that, I mean, they're the betting favorite. I'm not a huge fan of betting necessarily, but obviously they see something. I would say that I would be disappointed if they didn't get to the AFC Championship for sure. And I think when you talk about the defense and you add in Von Miller, right, Kaiir Elam, all these guys, like they brought back Shaq Lawson and Jordan Phillips, and they've got Tim Settle. And then you look at sort of what I talked about with the offense, with how I really don't think they were humming on all cylinders for up until, the last 3 games of the year, and then the playoffs. You add in sort of expanding into the tight ends, expanding the running backs. And my thing is, okay, well, how do you stop them? Like, who is going to stop them? Like if everything goes right, like last year, a lot of things went wrong, and they still should have went to the AFC Championship. So now tell me how you're going to stop them. Like, Bill Belichick can't stop Josh Allen, greatest defensive guy ever, doesn't have answers.
That is true. He's
So,
got no
I mean,
answers
I
for
don't
him.
know. You
It's got
like
no.
just
It's
yeah.
like Nick Saban in 2 years, even though they won and they beat Clemson, he couldn't stop Deshaun Watson. He had a month to prepare, and then the following year he has a month to prepare. He couldn't stop Deshaun Watson. Okay, so final question, then we'll let you get out of here. Thank you so much for joining us. Definitely want to have you on again during the season to talk Bills. If you're taking one quarterback, are you taking Josh Allen or are you taking someone else?
Josh
For one
Allen,
game. For one
I think
game.
he's the best player in the league. I don't think there's a quarterback that's ever been like him in terms of the combination of traits. I don't think there's ever been a 6'5", 245 quarterback who runs a 4.75, who's got one of the 5 strongest arms in the league. I just don't think there's ever been a guy like him. I think there's parts of him in Elway. I think there's parts of him in Favre, but I don't think it's ever been combined this way. I know that there's 3 or 4 players that you could put into a bucket, Aaron Donald, Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, TJ Watt, maybe Jalen Ramsey. But I think Josh Allen's the best player in the league. If I only have one game, I'm taking Josh Allen.
I will say this. I was 1,000% wrong on Josh Allen, and this is why I think Ken
So was
Dorsey
I.
is going to, because in Wyoming, which basically plays, a schedule that is disgusting. He played 2 good teams. He played Iowa and Oregon, and his completion percentage was like 43% in those 2 games. He was less than 55% completion percentage at Wyoming. What has amazed me is the coaching staff of the Bills has made this guy not only a great all-around quarterback, but he's become so much more efficient. And his completion percentage at Wyoming, where he should have been 75%, because they have basically, Division II high school players that he's going to get, Division II college players in a weak division. He has grown every year. I was way wrong about this guy.
Yeah, and I would say I give most of the credit to Josh Allen. I think it's really, 60% Josh Allen, 40% the team. When he first came in, his first offseason, he's always had a plan. They said, okay, you need to get better at this or this or this. In the offseason between 2018 and 2019, he wanted to get better in the intermediate area. So he went and worked with Jordan Palmer. If you've ever heard Jordan Palmer interview, he's great. If you haven't, you should try and find an interview with him. He's fantastic. He went out there and worked with Jordan Palmer for like 6 weeks. He visits them in season, and they kind of like refine his throwing motion. So he did a lot of work then. Same thing between 2019 and 2020. Then he, remember, like, oh, Josh Allen can't throw the deep ball. What did he do? He went with Jordan Palmer again in the offseason, 4 or 5 weeks with Jordan Palmer. They went and they worked on the deep ball. And then between 2020 and 2021, it was more of now we're good. Like,
right.
Now let's, and the whole goal, according to Jordan Palmer, was for Josh Allen to peak against the Chiefs in the playoffs and be at his peak at that point. So the Bills used the entire regular season, as kind of like a run up, like how, like when you're running a marathon, you want to be good in the last 3 miles, right? It doesn't matter how good you are at mile 4.
Right.
And so that's what they did. They want to peak. And then that's what the whole goal is. He only worked with Jordan Palmer for maybe a few weeks this offseason, but a credit to him. He hasn't taken the offseason to just play video games all offseason or whatever it is. He took ownership of his career, and he wanted to be as good as he could possibly be. And so, yes, the Bills, I think, built around him correctly with veterans on offense, maybe not the best veterans, but veterans on offense. So he didn't have to worry about wide receivers reading leverage. Like, they were veterans. They could do that already. But a credit to him, he took ownership. They built around him and obviously ran plays he was comfortable with, but it's at least a 50-50 proposition in terms of who gets the credit for that.
Final question. Fan is short for fanatical, like you said. I am not a diehard fan of anything. I probably watched about 65, maybe 60 regular season New York Ranger games this year. When they lost to Tampa Bay, I was heartbroken because they were up 2-0. They could have went to the Stanley Cup and they lost. I didn't lose sleep over it. When the Packers lost to San Francisco last year, I woke up the next morning and it was a Sunday. I watched the other games. I'm here in Florida. I watch every Met game. My dad's a huge Met fan. I hope the Mets win for my dad because he's a diehard Met fan. I don't take it seriously. I may curse during the game. I may get emotional, but as soon as it's over, I don't care. But there's something really, really special, and I say that in a positive, about the Bills Mafia. Talk about this fan base and how fanatical they are.
Yeah, and I think it's really because of the drought. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm 44, so I was 13 in 1990. So, and I was lucky enough, my uncle had season tickets, so I got to go to all those games in person. I didn't go to the Super Bowl; I wasn't that lucky, but I went to all the other games, and I got to see those teams up close, and then into the Wade Phillips era with Ted Washington and Pat Williams and Drew Bledsoe, and there's a lot of fans that I think were 5 years old then, or 2 years old, or they were born in 1996, and they grew up with parents who were so into it, and then they sort of start becoming teenagers, and they're stuck with this 17-year playoff drought. Really bad teams can't win against Tom Brady, and so you have this situation where you got this passion for this team from your parents or your uncle or your grandparents, but they're terrible. And it's like you were born too late in life in a way. And then all of a sudden you sort of like get Sean McDermott, and then a few months later you get Brandon Beane, and it's the first time in 20 years that the team seems to have a plan. And then you love guys like Fred Jackson. You love guys like Stevie Johnson, who actually started more. He didn't start Bills Mafia, but he was the first person to promote the hashtag. That was Stevie Johnson. You love guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick. Bills fans have always identified with the underdog, the guy who isn't that talented.
Lunch pail type of guy.
Yeah. And then you get a guy like Josh Allen, right? Who's like really good. He immediately connected with the fan base. He grew up on a farm, like in California. He's like a pistachio farmer, basically, who plays football. The whole leap against the Vikings, like the chicken leg, right? Like he just identifies with that blue collar thing, and the fans were so desperate that they just fell in love with the guy obsessively almost to this point. And now the team's good, and now shocking news to everybody. There's not a lot to do in Buffalo.
Jersey Girl brings up a good point. It's almost like the SEC up in Buffalo, right?
Yes.
The way they treat the Bills. It's like a college atmosphere, the way they treat their Bills.
Yes, and it's a very civic pride thing because everyone always, craps on Buffalo. It snows in Chicago. It snows in Green Bay. It snows in New York. It snows in Pittsburgh. It snows in Philadelphia. It snows in New England. And those are all the frozen tundra. But Buffalo, it's like, oh, it snowed again in crappy Buffalo. Here we are, Troy Aikman. And people are like, why are you picking on us? Everywhere else, it's this romanticized thing. And for us, it's like the worst thing on the world. And you just talk crap about, on the TV broadcast. So I think people are kind of like, middle finger to all you guys. And I think Josh Allen has sort of become like the emotional, and the Bills, the emotional mouthpiece of the people. Like I think he really cares about the people here. They really care about him. And now the team's really good. So no one can really say anything. What are you going to say? People are like, oh, well, you lost 4 Super Bowls. Okay, yeah, 40 years ago almost at this point, who cares?
Not just that, they got to 4 straight. They got to 4 straight. So that's an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah, and the other thing I will say too, I know that we're close to the end here. Bills Mafia, the people who started it, it's a guy named Del Reed, a lady named Leslie Ann. There's a couple other people, and it basically started as a joke against Adam Schefter, actually. I believe the Stevie Johnson "Why So Serious" thing, Schefter didn't tweet it for like 24 hours, and they were kind of picking on him on Twitter, and he blocked them all. And then they were like, "Oh, we're the Bills Mafia," and then Stevie Johnson kind of tweeted it out like hashtag Bills Mafia, and it blew up from there. For those of you who don't know, Del Reed owns a t-shirt company here called 26 Shirts, and he designs t-shirts that are Bills themed or Sabres themed, but they also have a charitable part to it, like somebody battling cancer, he'll design a shirt for them and then he sells it. Well, 26 Shirts has raised about $1 million in the past 15-12 years doing the charity t-shirt thing. I'm sure a lot of people are aware about the monetary donations to like Lamar Jackson, obviously to Andy Dalton. When Josh Allen's grandmother died, people donated like $1 million to the Children's Hospital here in her name.
Yes, that was
so
great.
If you really kind of total that up, the Bills Mafia has donated something like $4 or $5 million of their own money to various charities across the country and in the Buffalo area too. When people talk crap, the Chicago station was talking crap, and the Bills Mafia just ended up donating like $100,000 to a children's hospital there.
Yeah.
So I did want to point that out before we get out of here, that yeah, we're a little weird. We go through tables, that kind of stuff, but very willing to be charitable and to any, like I said, I think $500,000 to Lamar Jackson when he got the concussion in the playoff game, so good people up here for the most part.
Yeah, you bring up great points. Okay, how can we follow you? How can we support you? And give me a total. Are the Bills 14-3? Is that what you're saying? 13-4? Give us a quick prediction, and how can we follow you and support you?
I think the range is probably 11-6 to 15-2. I'll sort of stay in the middle with 13-4. Weird stuff happens. They lost to the Jaguars last year, 9-6. So who really knows? Any given Sunday, I think is pretty true. I got a parent company right here called 12 Squared. And that's also my YouTube channel. I own an NFL analytics company, which you can also see right there behind me, called Trust the Process Analytics. I'll be doing player grades. I've got some other stuff with the draft. I also do scouting reports. I've got a Bills podcast called Humble and Hungry. I'm going to be writing Bills articles for Nuts and Bolts Sports. I'm going to start an NFL podcast as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at @TTP_Charlie. We will be getting like a TikTok account and an Instagram and all that. But right now it's mainly just on Twitter. And I want to thank you, of course, Monte, for having me on. I had a great time today, and hopefully we can do it again sometime during the season.
We will definitely have you on to talk Bills. I know I have a lot of people who watch this show who are pro Buffalo Bills. I like the Bills. I think they're just missing that running game. That's the one thing but again, you look at the way, has Tom Brady ever had an elite running back? I would say no. Right? I mean, he never has.
Their MO was throw it to James White, throw it to Wes Welker, 45 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and somehow they get 7 yards when they need 6. And I
do. And by the way, I'll follow you on TikTok. I just hit 1 million views on TikTok in like 6 months.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sports stuff. So if you have Bills fans, I will follow you. Anything you need, just put it on my page. I'll retweet, and we'll see you down the road.
Okay, thanks, Monte. I appreciate it.
Great job, Charlie. That was Charlie Gross. Does a great job covering the Buffalo Bills. I want to thank Chris Rosvoglou for covering the Saints. I want to thank all of you. Thank you for watching my TikTok videos. Thank you for supporting the show. Okay, so we are taking 2 weeks off, and then we come back Sunday, August 28th, for our first Sunday show. Remember, we stopped doing Sunday shows in April, and we start the NFL preseason shows August 28th. I want to thank you all for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks on Sunday. And then the Monday night shows will start up during the football season with Brad Ward and A. Marie, the 2 co-hosts that I had last year. They did an absolute tremendous job. They're chomping at the bit, waiting to go for the Monday show. So we'll see you in 2 weeks on Sunday, August 28th. In the immortal words of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back. Record.
They hit big shots. Clippers and kept going.
Oh, look at that reaction. Look at that reaction.